What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stuckey.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Welcome into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Brendan Glasheen. Today, we return with one of the most fun annual episodes of the NFL preseason. I also really enjoy this. I think a lot of folks that work at Action Network enjoy this one when it is published and put out to the people, which you matter more than we do, but I think you'd all agree, I hope. We're covering exotic NFL wagers for the 2024 season. Basically anything that is not a standard bet or a standard future or an NFL award or a season-long player prop. All the other stuff. This is when we cover all of the other stuff. We're going to do it with two of our favorites. I think I've done this with these guys now, at least the last couple years. Joe Gallant, the touchdown bettor, he's here, and Mr. Brandon Anderson. I want to get this out there right now before there are any doubts, questions, conspiracy theories. Combined, these two are going to give out about 25 bets. So I will speak for them because I've consulted them before we recorded. We're talking like pizza size bets. And when I don't mean the actual physical pizza, I mean the price of a pizza. Bonus plays that you might have at your respective books, $5 to $10 long shots. So the hope is to hit one of these. And in some cases, based on the line, a handful, right? So wanted to get that out there. You do what you want as the gambler, as the audience, responsibly, of course, but wanted to get that out there. So without further ado, our first topic, category, betting discussion as it pertains to the exotics. Brandon, we're going to talk best record. What do you got?
I'm going to start out with a responsible bet, Brendan. Just one. I got to do one on the podcast. So give me the Chiefs, plus 750. Now, you got to shop around because I've seen this as low as 400, 450. If you're that low, skip it. But if you're getting anywhere near 750, look, I need to tell you why it's the Chiefs. Pat Mahomes, you got the coaching staff, you got the line, 6 seasons, 6 conference championships. The defense is better now. The receivers are better now. The division is terrible. They're going to beat Denver twice. They're going to beat the Raiders twice. Chargers are moving in the right direction. The spine I like, but no weapons there. Lots of turnover. Even like the home Chargers game, that should be the one toughest game. That's a home Chiefs game in Los Angeles. That's an easy home game for them also. You can bet Chiefs 6-0 in the division, plus 375. I like that as well. But if you want the responsible bet here, I project the Chiefs #1 overall record, 12.1 wins. Now, it's a little low. That's kind of my numbers crunched together. I don't have anyone else almost within 1. My next highest is 11.2 wins. So to me, if you want to just try to get a winner here, come on. It's just the Chiefs. It's Pat. We know this by now.
And when we do these, I should get this out there too, that Brandon is going to have another one. So he's going to throw, in some cases, we'll have a couple for each of these categories. In some cases, might only be one. Last year, Brandon hit Dallas at 14-1, and he also had the Philadelphia Eagles 2 years ago at 20-1. And we give that historical data just so you don't think we're a bunch of schmucks, even though you might think so anyway. Jill, your best record pick.
Sure. So when I usually look at this market, I tend to steer away from the AFC. I just find it such a bloodbath that a lot of the time it's really difficult to project a team having more than 12 wins, just given how hard every team's schedule is. So for myself, I was looking more at the Detroit Lions. I'm going to take them at plus 900. I was flip-flopping between them and the Eagles, but I decided with Detroit. And this team is just low-key loaded. They made some nice offseason moves, got quarterback Carlton Davis from the Bucs, defensive end Marcus Davenport. They've got a top-ranked offensive line. They still have Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator. I think that's key because if he had left, I think we could see a big drop-off there offensively. And then, of course, they've got 2 stud running backs in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. But the elephant in the room, the guy I have not mentioned yet, is Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is probably the reason that anyone would even detract on this bet. But the one thing I would just reassure people about with Jared Goff, much like last year, he's just infinitely better playing indoors than he is outdoors. 5 outdoor games last year, Jared Goff saw his completion rate, touchdown per pass rate, yards per attempt, they all fall off a cliff. When he plays indoors, we see top 5 quarterback play. Well, from week 10 onward, the Lions only have to play outside twice, once in cold weather versus Chicago in week 16, and the other is San Francisco in week 17, which I think may likely end up deciding this market. So what that means is that they only have 4 outdoor games this entire season. Last year they had 5. The year before they had 6. I don't think it's a coincidence that their record has improved in that time, given that Jared Goff is able to be more effective indoors. So I think the Detroit Lions at 9-1 is who I like for the best record in the 2024 season.
Pardon me. The Lions only have 2, I would call really tough outdoor games. Green Bay, November 3rd at Lambeau, and then at Chicago, the 22nd in December. So there you go. And then both division games, of course. Those aren't surprises, but they're AFC draws, not too shabby as it pertains to the weather. Indy being included indoors. Brandon's got a second one for us. Best record play.
All right, now I'm going the long shot here, and I am actually reluctantly in on this team, I guess. My matrix, I rank all the positions, quarterbacks, coaches, special teams, the whole thing. This team came out number 4 in my list. I got Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers, and then my pick here, the Cleveland Browns, 50-1 for best record. So here's the case.
I love this bet.
I don't need to make the case for the defense. You watched them last year. The defense is incredible. Jim Schwartz, I think, is the best defensive coordinator right now. The defense actually was probably even better than they looked. They got unlucky in the red zone. They had unlucky turnover numbers. You got Myles Garrett. You got a great pass rush. They've built this team around pass rush and corners. That's the premium position in defense. That fits Jim Schwartz. Defense is really good. So the path you want here, and when I'm looking at long shots, what you want in long shots are multiple paths. You want to have multiple ways for this bet to come through. You're going to hear that a lot from me. Cleveland's offense. We need some paths. They sucked last year. They were terrible. They were 27th by DVOA. There's a lot of paths here. The offensive line, I think, is clearly top 5 if they can get healthy. Last year, their top 3 tackles basically all were out for the season. Now, we're still working on it. DeJuan Jones, the third guy, hopefully should be ready to go. The top 2 guys, we're still see about the health, but it should be better than last year. The interior is great. The run game hopefully gets better. We're going to get Chubb back at some point. Hopefully that helps. We added Jerry Jeudy at receiver. That should help a little bit. We added Ken Dorsey, offensive coordinator. I don't know how it's going to work. It sounds like Stefanski is still calling the plays, but I think that is a more pass-heavy, more balanced attack. That should help a lot. And then, of course, the huge swing factor here is quarterback. 5 dudes started games at quarterback for this team last year and made the playoffs. First time in NFL history. And I'm reluctantly betting on Deshaun Watson's upside here. I put him number 16 in my quarterback rankings. It's my wild card spot right in the middle. The last time we saw him healthy, he was a top 5 quarterback. By any metric you used, he was a stud elite quarterback that could lead this team to a great record. Now, that's 3 years ago. He missed a season for good reason. He came back mid-season with a whole bunch of new teammates and everything and stunk. That kind of makes sense. Last year, he had a shoulder injury, was in and out, and he was no good. That was on his throwing arm. That kind of makes sense. There are reasons he would be this bad. Now, he might just be cooked. I actually kind of don't mind Jameis Winston either. Jameis sort of feels like what Flacco was last year. Chalk it up. Give our guys a shot. Let the defense do things. Schedule, you start out Raiders, Giants, Washington, Saints, Denver, Pittsburgh. Lots of easy wins there for a defense this good. That's not all right at the beginning, but I have them at 10.5 wins. I only have 3 teams above them. The 3 I mentioned, clearly above them. So it's a long shot. I don't want Super Bowl futures. I don't want any part of this team in the playoffs, but I think they could be a 1 seed getting there with the top record, 50-1 Cleveland Browns.
I mean, if there's one thing we all agree on when it comes to Cleveland, taking out personnel, the coaching staff, I think, is beyond impressed with how Kevin Stefanski, no matter who's been his quarterback, Baker Mayfield, into Deshaun Watson. I mean, fair argument, fair points. Love it, but that's why it's a long shot. Let's go to worst record. Worst record in the NFL. I can tell you now that the favorite would be the New England Patriots at plus 270, and then there is a drastic drop-off to Panthers, Broncos, so on and so forth. Brandon, who jumps out to you value-wise?
Yeah, the Patriots would be my favorite as well, but you can't bet it at that number. I've got 4 teams basically in a tier at the bottom. I have the Patriots and Broncos, who you mentioned, and then I've got 2 NFC East teams, New York and Washington. Here's the thing. 3 of those teams just drafted a quarterback in the first round. One of them's got Daniel Jones. So I want the team that's going to suck and then suck more because they need a pick to get a quarterback next year. The Patriots don't need number 1. They got Drake May already. The Broncos, I mean, they still need a quarterback, but that's its own thing. Washington's not Jaden Daniels. The Giants, if they are bad, have every incentive to be worse and try to be worse and get that number 1 pick. You need a quarterback there. I don't think Malik Neighbors is going to save this offense. They're bottom of 5 offensive line. I do like the front 7 in defense, but the defensive coordinator typically is a pass funnel. This is the worst secondary in the league. I don't think that's going to go that well either. So I see this going very poorly for them. And again, I want motivation here. I want the team that wants number 1 to go get that quarterback. So I like Giants 10-1. That's my favorite here. I've got a long shot, but I think Jill has a favorite in that range also.
Yeah, we want Brian Daboll if he keeps his job, which more on that. First coach fired is coming up later in this particular episode. But we want Daboll sending scouts to Carson Beck Georgia games in November and December for that number 1 pick. That's the idea there. That makes sense. Okay, Jill, go ahead.
All right, worst record. Brandon, apologies in advance. I know you're a Vikings fan, but I think they're going to be the worst team in the NFL this year. And at 12-1, that's the team I want to look at. The quarterback drop-off to Sam Darnold cannot be overstated. Brandon, you had Darnold at 24th in your overall quarterback rankings, but you did say the disclaimer that he could be this year's Baker. That doesn't necessarily inspire confidence in me. And I will just say this, like when you look at their schedule, like I'm not convinced he's going to be the starter by the time they get to the week 6 bye. They might just leave him in London because they've got a tough first 5 weeks of the year. They face 2 teams that rank in the top 5 in defensive DVOA last year in the 49ers and the Jets. Top 2 overall if you're using PFF. They've got the Giants on the road to start the year in what I thought was going to be a blitz off, but they've changed defensive coordinators with the Giants. They were 1st and 2nd in blitz rate last year. But Shane Bowen is coming over from the Titans, better run defense. And again, with Darnold, if that pass rush doesn't get to him in week 1, he's not seeing ghosts. He's going to have the Niners in week 2, and that's going to be brutal for him. They've got the Texans, the Packers on the road, and then they play the Jets in London in that week 6 bye. When they come out of the break, then they've got the Lions, Rams, Jags, and Colts. Like if they don't win in week 1, it's conceivable this team could start 0-8 for the year. So also wanted to give a little shout out to Sean Kerner, our director of predictive analytics. He has the Vikings with the 5th hardest strength of schedule this year out of all 32 NFL teams. So I think the Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold at quarterback are just going to be brutal. And again, apologies for Brandon. Didn't mean to crap on your team too much.
Really quick follow-up to that. Jefferson was banged up last year. They used multiple quarterbacks last year, and they somehow treaded water and wound up in that 500-ish record. Your response to that?
I think there's just too much of a drop-off. Again, I'm not saying that they couldn't be able to, manufacture some wins late, but this could be one of those teams like where the wheels fall off. Maybe okay. Kevin O'Connell is showing the door. There's just a lot that could go wrong with this team. And it's more about the odds too. At 12-1, I think that's a team where I would look at. Whereas instead of a team like New England, where the writing's on the wall, it's not going to be a good year.
Oh, and then I'll come back on the other side. Hawkinson definitely out the first 4 weeks. That's a factor, right? Aaron Jones, I know, is there. And if Jefferson was banged up last season. So I do enjoy now in analysis of any market now, when we do these types of episodes, betting or not betting, the line of just leave him in London, leave him in London, or leave him in Mexico City, or maybe this year Brazil after the first weekend. These island games in Europe, just leave him over there. I mean, I said it a few times last year when the Patriots were over there in Germany with Mac Jones. I just like that banter now about leaving them overseas because it's very soon they're probably going to have a team over there. Anyway, Brandon's got one more. Worst record.
Yeah, further down the board, here's my long shot. Give me the Los Angeles Rams. Worst record in the NFL, 60-1. Now, here's the case. Look, we know the offense is going to be really good. Sean McVay, Stafford, the receivers, Kyron Williams running the ball. Now, the offensive line I have as a top 10 offensive line, but it's not been a good training camp. There's a lot of injuries there. Cluster injuries on line or at corner are a great way to derail a season. You know what's also a great way to derail a season? Matt Stafford being 36 and like one hit away from retiring. Remember, we thought that a year ago at this time. We didn't know if he was ever going to come back and be this level again. He's right there. And don't forget, this defense was 22nd in DVOA last year. They lost Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator who helped win the Super Bowl. They lost Aaron Donald, the best defensive player of our lifetimes. They took that off of a bottom 10 defense. I have this as the number 31 defense. They don't really have a strength. They don't have a known name leading the team. And I think it's the best offensive division in football. I'm in on Seattle and Arizona. We'll get to them a little bit later on. Even assuming regular health, I have the Rams at 6.8 wins. I have them the 6th worst record. And that is assuming good health. If Stafford gets injured, not only do they lose more games, but they are, again, a motivated team that needs a quarterback now, that needs the next Stafford on this team. So they're a team that if things start to go badly, I want the long tail down. I want the long way out. And they could be a team. I think McVay's smart enough here to be like, you know what? Let's take my lumps for a year. Let's get a pick and get a new quarterback in here if needed, if it goes poorly. So Rams 60-1 for worst record.
Puka Nacua nicked up in camp. Cooper Kupp was out last year in games. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Matthew Stafford, you cannot dismiss the decade plus in Detroit getting his ass beat up. And is that going to catch up with him sooner, right? Because we see quarterbacks now playing into 39, 40. Brady, Rodgers most recently for sure. More on the Jets very soon. Okay, let's do this next market where the Jets are going to be. Well, they were discussed last year. This next market was make or miss the playoffs. And both Jill and Brandon on this very episode, this time last year, both hit the Jets at plus 120. As we know, 4 plays in, Aaron Rodgers done for the year. I remember being in New York at Action Network HQ with Brandon the next day trying to figure out how do we bet this team? How do we capitalize on this? Well, the Jets are not in this year's conversation. Brandon, this transitions well from Rams' worst record, a take on the Rams make or miss playoffs.
Yeah, Rams miss playoffs is plus 105. You're giving me plus money on a team that I think has a chance at the worst record, that I think is number 6 worst record, even if relatively healthy. Like, I'm going to take that. That's the case. I don't have much more to add to that. I only have the Giants and Commanders below them in the NFC. Again, the healthy version of them. That's where I have the Rams at. So plus 105 for them. In that division, though, I mentioned a team I want to come back to, the Seahawks. We're back to Seahawks Island. It's not quite an island right now because we kind of like them now. They're a thing. Seahawks to make the playoffs, plus 215. I'm in. I just like everything about this team. I love the Mike McDonald hire. I thought he was the number 1 coaching hire. He's the CEO. He's the guy that everyone seemed excited to bring in. Look, Pete Carroll's a good coach, but I think this is a fresh voice for a team that needed one after many years. I have this defense taking a huge step forward. They have on the line Leonard Williams, who they got mid last season, Draymond Jones. They drafted Byron Murphy in the first round. I love linebackers Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, 2 kind of like nerd niche backers. I think they'll be really good. Devin Weatherspoon, last year's first round pick. I think he might be the Kyle Hamilton on this team for Mike McDonald, that weapon that blows stuff up. And don't forget, McDonald's defense specifically in recent years has been good against the Shanahan-McVay offense. They're in this division. Shanahan and McVay are here. This is the guy you wanted here. I have the Seahawks guys as my number 5 defense this year. And I like the offense. Ryan Grubb comes over from Washington, not Washington Commanders. We don't like that. Washington Huskies from college. Michael Penix and those receivers we saw bombing it downfield all last season. Geno Smith, I can go back and forth on our guy. The one thing I know he does well is he is the number 1 deep ball passer by PFF. The guy can just chuck it down the field. And I think with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, I think is going to have a big sophomore season. I think we're going to get some long, deep passes. We've had a top 8 special teams, 4 straight on this team. We literally hired a Harbaugh. There's another Harbaugh out there. We got him to run the special teams. I'm just in on Seattle. The NFC is a weaker conference. I've got like Green Bay, Chicago fighting for the last spot in the division or in the conference. So really Seattle, I have holding off the number 2 team from the NFC South, which is a position I am happy to be in. So with the Rams out, for me, Seattle is in plus 215 to make the playoffs.
Well said. And I like their tight ends too. Noah Fant, Farrell Brown was good in New England last year. Offensive line is fine. And And do you get good quarterback play out of Geno Smith? He showed signs that he can still play the position at an average to maybe some days above average level, any given Sunday. Jill, make or miss playoffs. Who jumps out?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the AFC, and I'm going to take the Jaguars to make the playoffs at plus 120. I loved some of the roster moves they made in the offseason, getting Eric Armstead on the defensive line, Darnell Savage at the secondary. They even got Ronald Darby, who's a little washed, but he should be able to help some of the secondary as well. Now, I know one of the things that people will look at this offense and say they don't have a top-end wide receiver. I'm not the biggest Calvin Ridley truther. Like, I think he's pretty good, but again, I don't think he was worth that money. And I think they did better with their resources by being able to draft somebody who they're really high on in Brian Thomas and spreading that money out to those defensive players, even Gabe Davis and Devin Duvernay. Again, not peak quality, but enough where you could stretch it out and have more talent on the field at a time. But again, Trevor Lawrence, I think, is really where this comes down to. And that ankle injury that he suffered in week 11 was brutal. The Jags were 8-3 coming into that game. He only had 7 interceptions. He was completing close to like 68% of his passes. That would have been a career high. That would have been top 3 in the NFL. But in the final 4 games, he just completely fell apart. The entire Jaguars team, he was awful. He had 7 interceptions just in those 4 games. His yards per attempt dropped, EPA per play. They lost 4 games in a row. And despite that, they were still in the mix to make the playoffs in week 18 against the Titans. But again, cough that up as well. And again, I know, Brandon, in your coaching rankings, not as really higher on Doug Peterson. I like Doug Peterson, but I also agree with you. I think he is still dining out on the Philly special 5 years later. But also their defensive coordinator hire, I really enjoy him and Ryan Nielsen, mainly just because of making the Falcons defense not terrible. They don't really have a ton of talent on that team, and they were above average for most of the years that he was there, be able to make something out of nothing. There's a lot more talent on the defensive side of the ball on the Jags than offensively. And then when I was looking at the other markets of like whether or not maybe the Jags like to win the division, for example, they're around plus 250 to win the division. At plus 120, I'd rather just take them to make the playoffs given that price difference. So I like the Jags to make the playoffs at plus 120 in the AFC.
Trevor Lawrence is one of those few quarterbacks. Well, I guess technically several quarterbacks who are just paid. And I think we've yet to see, even in that 8-3 start, and even being a playoff team 2 years ago, has Trevor Lawrence even had his best year yet, overcoming the Urban Meyer debacle? And as you said, Peterson at least got through to him to make a playoff run. Only lost by a touchdown to the Chiefs in that 2022 playoffs. Like, Trevor Lawrence still hasn't had a number 1 overall pick caliber year for as highly touted as he was coming out of college. I guess is what I'm getting at. So kind of a prove it year for Lawrence with the injury as well last year. Okay. And Brandon's got one more make or miss playoffs. Give us the team, make or miss.
Yeah, I'll go with a miss here. I'm going to go for the second straight year. Give me the Bengals plus 210 to miss the playoffs. Now look, you can read right now today, as you were listening to this at Action Network, you can read my worst to first division column. One of my favorites to do every year. We'll get back to that in a second. The Bengals were last year. I thought they were the obvious worst to first pick. I expected them to be an obvious pick. I actually ended up with them third in the division here. You heard me make the case for Cleveland already. We know Baltimore is good. I think the Bengals might be living off that Super Bowl reputation a little bit still. Here's the rankings by this team, offense and defense, the last 3 years. Offense, 11th last year, 4th before that, really good, 18th before that. Not that great. Defense, Lou Anarumo. We love Lou Anarumo. 23rd, 11th, and 19th the last 3 years. Like, just pretty average for the most part. I don't think the coaching staff is adding much to this team. Zach Taylor, I've never been a fan of. They lost Callahan and replaced him in-house when they had a chance to bring a new voice in. The O-line is below average and kind of slowly getting worse. I don't think it's a bad team. I have them at 9.7 wins. I have them 8 seed, so 1 spot out of the playoffs. But the AFC is loaded. There's a lot of teams to make the playoffs in the AFC. And early on, the Bengals play the Chiefs in week 2 at Burrowhead. We know Kansas City will be ready for that one, right? They play Ravens in week 5. So I like with these make-miss playoffs, you can kind of like get both sides of the equation and hedge at different times if you want. If you're not feeling this one, even if the Bengals lose a couple of those games early and you're like, you know what, I kind of like them, you could probably at that point get a plus on the other side and then just be done. And you've made a little bit of profit and you're done for the season. So it's not a team I hate by any stretch. I think they'll be in the mix this year. Obviously, Burrow was injured last year, so getting him back is huge. But I just think it's a bad number, plus 210. I'd make it more like 50-50.
Well, historically, since they drafted Burrow, they have started slow, healthy or not. The first couple weeks, that is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And it aligns with how good the conference is, at least as far as quarterback play. That's for sure. Okay, let's move on to our next one. Division Longshot. Also, I want to make mention, you squeezed in Burrowhead, and for about a half second, I thought you misspoke, and I'm like, oh, right, that. That thing. I totally forgot about that until you mentioned it. Division Longshots. Last year, Brandon on this pod nailed the Texans at 11-1, worst to first. Texans playoffs. Mr. Will Anderson still holds a very special place in our hearts at 25-1. That was one of our best bets pods late in the year. Yep. We got the 25-1. You played him earlier in the year, of course, but we got that better price. Jalen Carter, thank you for not playing a lot at the end of the year. Texans Island was a thing last year, and the Jaguars in 2022, which we just discussed with Jill when he mentioned the Jags for this season to make the playoffs. With all that in mind, this is where you can get really creative, right? Division long shots, Brandon, where are we heading? And also, I'll say it now. If Brandon is going to use a team Twitter hashtag in his show notes, then I know he's really excited. So give it to us.
Look, Brandon, it's time to go island hunting, right? There's a lot of pressure, right? We've found Texans Island and Seahawks Island and Jaguars Island the last 3 years. What's the island? People have been asking me for like 6 months, what's the island we're finding? I've got a few other islands I visited. I put down, maybe not quite this one. We'll mention a couple of others. Here's the thing. When you're picking an island, you got to pay attention to which archipelago you're in. You got to pay attention to the surroundings. I want an island in a surroundings that I can win. That's why I liked Houston and Jacksonville the last couple of years, because that division was terrible. So first things first, well, okay. I got the shirt on. This is the closest I get. This is just like a bland blue color. As close as I get. Keep pounding, baby. Panthers Island, 13-1, worst to first division winner. Okay, I want this division. I want to pick on all the teams in this division to suck. We did that all last year. It was great. The NFC South is terrible. The Saints are bottom 3 head coach and offensive line. The Bucs are blah. They're fading. We know that. The Falcons are the team that are like the by default, but I think this is like a 500-ish team. I think they're a pretty average offense, a pretty average at best defense. Coaching staff is unproven. To me, with the Panthers, this reeks of post-Urban Meyer year 2 Trevor Lawrence. Last year's coaching on this team was abysmal. We cleaned staff, we got rid of everything, we started over. We also had, this was the 3rd worst team by injuries, games lost per Aaron Schatz at FTN. Now we got Dave Canales, the adult in the room. He's the Doug Peterson here. Dave Canales, who already in the last couple years worked with Baker Mayfield, helped him redeem his career, worked with Geno Smith, helped him redeem his career. Next up, Bryce Young. That's what we got to do here. Did not think I'd be betting on Bryce Young. But again, we're looking for paths here. The offense. The line is not good yet, but their left tackle, center, right tackle started every game last season. The guards, they started 10 guards last season between 2 positions. They went out and they signed 2 good guards. That's going to help. Receivers, terrible last season. Just Adam Thielen catching like 25 balls a game. They signed Deontay Johnson, a real route runner. They drafted Xavier Legette, is how I'm hearing that we're pronouncing this name now. They drafted Jonathan Brooks, the best running back in the draft. He's not ready yet, but the run game was pretty good this team last year. Toward down the stretch, Chuba Hubbard was turning it out. And then Bryce Young. Bryce Young was awful. He was terrible. I don't have any secret numbers I found. I don't have any way to redeem that. The way to redeem that is Dave Canales and not last year's coaching staff. Even if Bryce Young can just be like 24th best quarterback or 20th best quarterback. This guy was number 1 pick a year ago, right? Let's not give up after 1 year. Just get some competence. Now we're at 6 or 7 wins. I think 9 wins gets the division. Here's the first games, 10 games for the Panthers. This is the actual first 10 games. I think they could win every one of these games. They're not going to win all of them. I think they could win any of these games. Saints, Chargers, Raiders, Bengals, Bears, Falcons, Commanders, Broncos, Saints, Giants. These are not good teams. There's no good teams in the division. These are not great opponents. It gets tougher later in the year. They play the Chiefs, play the rest of the NFC East. But I think the Panthers can win some games. I love the over 5.5. It's my favorite win total on the board. In this division, I have the Panthers projected at 8.3 wins, guys. I have Atlanta 8.5. I have the Saints 8.0. I have the Bucs last in the division. So I make the Panthers about plus 250, actually. We're getting plus 1,300 here. Here's one final stat for you. On quarterbacks that get drafted number 1, they don't do well the first year. That was the reason I faded the Panthers last year. I wanted Panthers last year. I talked myself out of the stock. Rookie to sophomore leaps. Let me give you some numbers. Jameis Winston, number 1 pick. 6 games he won as a freshman, as a rookie. 9 his next year. Jared Goff went from 0 wins to 11. Kyler Murray, 3 to 7. Joe Burrow, 2 to 10. Trevor Lawrence, 3 to 9 wins. These guys have averaged a leap of 5.5 wins. Bryce Young won 2. So now we're at 7.5. We only probably need like one more win. We might win this division. Panthers Island, baby. I can't believe we got here. We're in. Keep pounding. Let's go. 13-1.
Number 1, I knew you'd be excited. 2, I'm getting married very soon. Do you want to book my honeymoon, Island Man? Because God, it's so
I am the island guy.
Okay, that's that. I needed to take a second. Nice big pause.
But let's just hope that Panthers Island is nowhere near Roanoke Island for your history buffs out there.
All right, fantastic. Okay, Jill Gallant, Division Longshot.
Okay, so it's not going to be as cool or shiny as what Brandon just presented, but it is piggybacking a little bit off of his best record long shot, and that's the Browns to win the AFC North around plus 550. It's really difficult for me to overlook a divisional odds winner when you have, inarguable, a top 3 defense, returning pretty much nearly all of their starters. Again, Jim Schwartz is coming back. I think that's huge. They added Devin Bush to their linebackers. This is really a turnkey team. There's not really a lot to improve except for quarterback. They've got a top 5 offensive line. They've got a great coaching staff. I mean, Kevin Stefanski just won his 2nd coach of the year. Nick Chubb is going to start on the pup list, but if you watch his offseason training videos, he looks like he's training to be like Mr. World, like with how much weight he's lifting. Like, imagine he's going to come out week 5 and be just as strong, or not much adjustment time when he eventually gets back. But then also looking at the rest of the teams in the division, like Baltimore has nearly the same strength of schedule as the Browns, and they've regressed with their roster. The Bengals, Brandon kind of touched on this a second ago, but I would bet on them maybe a little bit later in the season, because both years where Cincinnati did have regular season success, it was actually more in the latter half of the season. They always really kind of stumbled out of the gate, and then they would just get hot from week 9 onward. And again, the Steelers, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. So they don't have a quarterback, and they have less talent on both sides of the ball. So again, the only reason why we would even consider that a long shot at 500 or 50-1, or even plus 550 for them to win the AFC North, is because of Deshaun Watson. And again, I don't think it's that much of a drop off from Jameis Winston to Deshaun Watson based on what we've seen. So I think right now the Browns are the best bet to make for a division, especially at plus 550.
Brandon, quick follow-up you want on the Browns for a different market, obviously, outside of what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, this is a best bet for me too. So I just want to make sure to chime in here. Like this is equally a best bet to me. It's not a worst to first, so it's on an island for me, but I love Browns plus 550. I make this a little bit under plus 200, about 35% likely. Pittsburgh I have kind of out of the picture, and then I have them at 10.5 wins versus 10.7 Baltimore, and Cincy just under 10. This also is the one you got to bet now. You play the Cowboys in week 1 as Cleveland. That's a toss-up, but if you get that one, Jacksonville, then the Giants, Raiders, and Commanders. So if you get the win in week 1, you suddenly might be sitting at 5-0. And if you give the quarterback a chance to get some momentum, figure some things out, find a little offense, you never know how things go after that. Like, momentum is a real thing week to week in sports. So yeah, I love the Browns. Just 2 other quick division long shots just to mention out. Need to make the case here. Rams last in the division, plus 700. Again, I've talked a lot about this division. Guys, I wanted Cardinals Island. I wanted it so bad. I'm in on Kyler Murray. I love Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator. I have them dead last on defense. I think the Cardinals and the Rams are kind of the same thing. I think it's a pretty good offense and a terrible defense. I have the Cardinals slightly ahead because of strength of schedule. So I think Rams last division is just a head-to-head, Rams versus Cardinals. I think it's close, but 7-1, I'll take that. Then on the other side, I think the Niners are really good. I can't quite get there on Seahawks division, but if I'm going to get there, give me the 1-2 exact outcome. Seattle first, Niners second, because I've got to gap them before the other teams. That's 12-1 odds. So again, getting fancy with the division odds here. Just Seahawks division is an 8-1 if you prefer that. But I like this division a lot. I think this is the division I'm most excited about this year. So I want to get creative with some ways to bet it.
Okay, NFL Week 1 is next week, folks. So if you're listening out there and you haven't signed up for an Action Pro subscription, now is the best time to do so. Also, betting the Browns to have a possible worst to first. That's what we're looking for here. With Action Pro, you can find the best edges in NFL player prop picks with projections from Sean Kerner and the Action Analytics team. Plus, this season, getting expert picks alerts even faster. Only Pro gives you access to expert pick alerts in real time from Brandon, who's here, Jill, who's here, Sean Kerner, who we've mentioned, Stuckey, and our whole team of experts. To sign up, just go to actionnetwork.com/pricing or check out the link in the episode description. Got a couple more to go, a couple more long shot categories to go. Let's discuss team points scored. So to map that out, most points scored, least points scored for the entire season. We had Evan Abrams, our director of research, on this very podcast last year, and he nailed least points scored, the New England Patriots at 30-1. Ended up being a split in the end. I forget who they tied with. Someone it's probably Carolina, I would imagine.
I think it was a three-way tie, actually, somehow.
Okay, Carolina. Well, anyway, Patriots were involved at 30-1, and somehow to get a tie is pretty amazing. That ended up playing out that way. Okay, so with that in mind, Brandon, which direction are you heading in, and with which team?
Yeah, I'm going to go with points scored. I'll give you two. I'll give you a most and a least. Give me the Dolphins. Most points scored, 16-1. I think it's a ludicrous number. The Dolphins, the offense that we all know is amazing. The offense that dropped 70 on Denver last year. They finished at 496. They were 13 behind Dallas for winning this category a year ago. And don't forget, they scored 19 and 14 the last two games. Just like don't stink the last 2 weeks, and the Dolphins would be the defending champion in this category. They had last year 8 games of 30 or more points. They had 3 games of 42 or more points. This is my number one offense. I don't need to make the case. Tyreek, Waddle, Achane, Mostert, you can score any play here. And you want them now because they always start out the year hot. We'll see if it holds up. But last year, through 6 games, they averaged over 37 points a game. Through 12 games, they were at 32 points a game. Even if it doesn't hold up late, you can hedge. You can figure out ways around this later with the ticket that you want leading. I don't know why in the world this would be 16-1. I think it's a terrible number. And then on the other end of the spectrum, least points scored, Commanders 30-1. The Commanders are my dead last offense. They're number 32. They've been a bottom 7 DVOA offense in 5 of the last 6 years. They've been bottom 9 in points scored 6 straight seasons. This is not a team that scores. They're my worst offensive line. They gave up a ton of sacks. They have no continuity. They have bottom 5 weapons. They traded away Jahan Dotson. Eckler, Ertz are washed. And then, of course, our lonesome loser, Cliff Kingsbury, is back to lead the offense. You know I'm betting against Cliff Kingsbury. This dude couldn't win football games with Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray or Caleb Williams. I don't know. If Jane Daniels is bad, you just got to play him. Like, they could just not be good all year. 30-1 Commanders for least points scored.
Okay. Welcome back, Cliff. What a welcoming gift. Brandon Anderson's going to bet against you. Jill Gallant, he's got 2 for us. What do you have?
I just love that Cliff keeps catching shrapnel on this pod.
Right?
I think that
No
just seems to
shit.
be an ongoing theme in this thing. All right, so I'm going to do least points allowed, and I'm going to take 2 teams. One is more closer to a favorite. I'm going to take a little bit of a long shot as well. So the one that's closer to a favorite, I'm going to take the Jets at plus 650 for least points allowed. And I think part of it, and a really huge part of it, is competent quarterback play will actually give this defense a little bit of a rest. And the fact that their offense was on the field for way less snaps than most teams, they had the worst third down percentage in over 20 years for an offense. It was 25% conversion rate. Next best team was the Patriots, 5% better. So it's just historically bad. You actually have an average quarterback, or even now considered an elite Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Maybe now this defense won't have to play as much and could actually shut some teams down. And it was just nearly impossible to field a good defense because they're constantly being the ball run on. Basically, they have a top 5 pass defense for DVOA last year, second rated pass defense rather. They're nearly impossible to throw on, but their run defense just get gashed because teams would never have to throw the ball on them essentially the entire year. And they went and got Javon Kinlaw from the 49ers. Maybe they resolve that stuff with Hassan Reddick. I'm not sure, but I don't even think they'll need him. I mean, they signed safety Chuck Clark from the Ravens too. I think that'll help. If they could just actually field a competent or even complementary offense, like this defense will finally be recognized, in my opinion, as the best in the NFL. Now, the long shot pick, though, I'm going to take the Chicago Bears at 28-1. Again, first look, the Jets were the first team that I saw. But here's a team that was the top team in stopping the run last year. They were first in opponent yards per carry. They allowed the second fewest rushing touchdowns. And then they've added defensive coordinator Eric Washington over from the Buffalo Bills. He was the defensive line coach, assistant coach for the Bills over the last 4 years. He oversaw a defense that was first, second, and fourth in opponent points per game over the last 3 seasons. Again, a lot of great pieces on defense as well. And not that it all comes down to one player, but Montez Sweat was pretty good for them last year, and that effect was real because after he got traded from Washington, the Bears only allowed 18 points per game in their final 9 games, and that would have finished top 3 if that was over a full season. I think there's a lot of upside for this defense to carry the load on this team. So I think at 28-1, that's a team that I would sprinkle on for fewest points allowed in the 2024 season.
I think it's an excellent point. Something I wouldn't even have thought of had you not mentioned it. Having on the other side of the ball competent quarterback play. And of course you have to have the personnel that are good on defense. I think the Jets do have, we'll see if Hassan Reddick plays, but they have enough competent pieces on the defensive end, but good stuff. That's a fun one. That's a fun segment. Team points scored, a couple of different directions there. Most points scored, least points scored, and then least points allowed as Jill mapped out with his too. Okay. This one's fun. Last winless team, Brandon,
I hate to do it to you. I got to break your heart. I'm going chalk on this one. It's your New England Patriots, 5-1, plus 500. It's my chalkiest pick on the draft in our podcast today. Look, I don't think there's ever been a bigger brain drain in NFL history than Bill Belichick being gone from this team. He was not just the head coach. He had his hands on the offensive line, now terrible. In special teams, now terrible. On defense, I'm not so sure. Like, I listen to a lot of these like top 10 defense rankings, and there's a lot of Patriots in there. I don't know, man. Belichick mattered a lot to this defense. Guys like Bentley and Tavai, the linebackers, guys like Duggar and Mapu at safety. The whole thing with them is they came cheaper in the draft because they were, quote, weapons, and Belichick weaponized them and figured out how to make them work. Are we positive Gerard Mayo is going to be the same thing? Like, he's been in the system. Like, I know we like him, but we don't know a lot about Mayo right now. I know a lot about Bill Belichick. He's really good at defense. So I actually have this as a bottom 10 defense. You lost Christian Barmore. I think really important on the defensive line. We don't know how long. You traded away Matthew Judon, probably their best pass rusher. The offense we know isn't very good. Alex Van Pelt, the new play caller, he's a low ceiling guy. Jacoby Brissett is the definition of low ceiling. They can't even play Drake May because the line is so bad that they're worried about protecting him. Special teams has gone bad. It's just a bad team. The division is tough. I have all 3 other teams in the division winning double digits and pushing for the playoffs. And then here's the schedule starting out. This is why this is the last winless team. Cincinnati, Seattle, the Jets, San Francisco, Miami, Houston, Jacksonville, the Jets again. These are all teams that think that they're pushing for the playoffs. They're 0-8 after that at Tennessee. That might be one of their best chances to win. And I looked at Tennessee here. They're 8-1. But if I'm going to pick a team at like 8-1, or I don't mind Jill's pick at plus 950, if I'm going that short anyway, for me, if I'm not picking the long shot, I'm just going to pick the team I think is like the clear favorite here. I also, by the way, like Patriots 0-6 in the division, plus 400. I go through and I project every single team on the schedule. Is it a win, a loss, a coin flip, or a definite lock win or lock loss? The Patriots are the only team that I've ever done in the history of doing that I don't even have a 50-50 game for. There are no coin flips. They just lose or definitely lose all the games. There's not even a coin flip on the map for me. So I think this is the clear worst team in the NFL. I will take them at plus 500 for last winless team.
You encapsulated the current experience very well. Christian Gonzalez, their first round corner who got hurt last year. He not great reports out of camp and preseason games, kind of getting burned. Belichick's last pick in the first round, as we know. You mentioned the Barmore thing. What else? Oh, I got one more note for you. It's just a joke that I think you guys would enjoy. The Boston Sports Talk Radio folk have told folks that Sunday, September 29th here in the New England area. That's the day when the Patriots go to San Francisco at 4:00. Get your apple picking in. That's your apple picking day. Shut the TV off. Don't even bother with San Francisco week 4. Get the apple picking in, even though you dread it with your significant other. That's the weekend. That's the day to turn the TV off and then catch watch the 1:00 if you want to watch, and then go out and apple pick during the Niners Patriots bloodbath. And I'll let you determine who I'm talking about is going to have the bloodbath day. But very well done, Brandon. I'm impressed with your breakdown of the Patriots. Okay, Jill, last winless team. You've got one for us.
Right. And the only reason why I didn't look at the Patriots is I was looking for a team that had just a little bit better odds. And I think this is actually baked into the odds why we're getting this is the Minnesota Vikings at plus 950. So I kind of went over this already with worst record. This is really a week 1 bet because if they lose to the Giants in the opening game, we talked about this 7 tough games in a row. And part of it, too, is just getting ahead of it, right? If they lose in week 1, these odds are going to plummet down closer to the same price of New England, which is the favorite in this market. So I think part of the strategy, though, is if you take them for worst record, you also take them for last winless team. That way, if they do win in week 1, you still have a little bit of a safety net.
Easy enough. Again, go back earlier in the pod discussing the worst record, very similar handicap, but good notes on the schedule. All right. Brandon's going to cover this one. Last unbeaten/undefeated team.
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the division with the Patriots. I'm going to go to the New York Jets, 17-1, last unbeaten. This is a team that I've been talking about on this podcast since March. This is a team, to me, you want the long tail outcomes. I don't want median outcomes with the Jets. If I'm going to be in on the Jets, I'm going to be in on all the question marks I'm accepting. So I at least may as well accept them to the degree that they should. In my matrix, again, I mentioned I rank all the quarterbacks, offensive lines, everything. The Jets are my number 1 team, guys. They, on paper, are my number 1 team. And I know football is not played on paper, but they just edge out the Chiefs and the Niners just only on roster, not including coaching. We'll get to that in a second. But we know the defense is awesome. They've been great for years, even with no offense. Jill just talked about that. Special teams was top 5 last year. And then the offense, look, they finished dead last offensively last year. There is no way to quantify the leap you're going to take on offense, going from a bottom 7 offensive line to what I have as a top 7 O-line this year. That is a massive swing. You bring in Tyron Smith, who for the 12 games he'll play is awesome. You get back Elijah Vera-Tucker. You've remade the line. You had Mike Williams. And then, of course, what bigger swing can you possibly have than Zach Wilson and all the losers that played quarterback for this team last year to hopefully a healthy Aaron Rodgers, from number 32 quarterback to a guy that I have 4th in my quarterback rankings. Now, you can quibble with that if you want, but Aaron Rodgers, in healthy seasons for his career, has been a top 11 DVOA offense every single season and top 8, 10 out of 13 seasons. So this to me is a team that offensively has a number 1 offense ceiling. If Rodgers is healthy, if this line is healthy, there's a lot of ifs, but again, we're going last unbeaten. If you want to bet on this team, maybe you don't want them the whole season. That's all right. How about half the season? Can we get there for last unbeaten? Again, like Joe mentioned, with the Vikings pick, you're paying a price here on week 1, Monday night in San Francisco. Jets are underdogs. We might just lose right away. We're out. But we know about Aaron Rodgers going to San Francisco, right, guys? We know that. And if you get out of that one, Titans, Patriots, Broncos, Vikings. Hey, feeling pretty good now. Then you got a Buffalo game Monday night in New York. Then you get Pittsburgh, New England. There's a path to 8-0. If this is going well, it could go very well. This is not the last time you're going to hear from me on the Jets. This is a team that you need to find ways to invest in the long tail. And I think last unbeaten team, 17-1, is a good way to do it.
But do we trust the coaches? Do we trust the coaches? Which leads us to first coach fired. Joe Gallant doesn't trust the coaching staff in New York.
No, not at all. And I think the real thing here, when you look at the first coach fired market, I think we should just put this out there right now that Dennis Allen is the favorite to be the first coach fired. Much like Josh McDaniels last year, Josh McDaniels is actually the favorite, and he was the first coach fired. I don't think that necessarily is indicative, and it's a huge odd swing from Dennis Allen, who's around plus 275, to the next one, which is, of course, Mike McCarthy around 6-1, who is always in the top 5 in this category. But out of every NFL coach in the NFL right now, the most pressure to win now, that's where I'm looking at, is Robert Saleh, because they went back-to-back years of 7-10. Part of the reason why I want to take Saleh here is that opening month. On paper, fairly easy schedule. 3 games with the Patriots, Broncos, and Titans. All of these teams are expected to win less than 7 games. That's more pressure for the Jets to win. And if the games that the Jets are expected to win, and if they stumble early, maybe their defense gets carved up and they lose, that New York media, they already have it out for him. They're going to chew his ass up if they lose to one of those teams. And if the defense falters or comes up short, all the blame is going to fall on him being a defensive guy. Jets ownership, they know their time is limited with Aaron Rodgers. You look at the rest of the division, Pats aren't good anymore. The Bills rosters regress. The Jets need to win now. And if they stumble out of the gate, I could see them pulling the chute on this and just saying, nope, get out of here. Hackett can take over.
I was just going to go there. Empower Aaron Rodgers Binky, who is Nathaniel Hackett. Most of these guys, and Jill gave a couple. Allen, of course, underperformed. Todd Bowles' track record, Robert Saleh, track record, Brian Daboll, is your side of the ball figured out? Daboll, as we learned in that Giants offseason Hard Knocks, I think he wants a quarterback, but he really liked Neighbors in those interviews and some of the other receivers. Sirianni, there appears to be turbulence with Sirianni and Jalen Hurts based on some of the reporting, and so on and so forth. Stefanski's been now with the Browns, and you guys have been advocating for the Browns, but I think that's a raw deal for Stefanski, but he's been there a bit. Antonio Pierce, first year without the interim tag. So Sean McDermott caught a lot of crap at the end of last year. Then they figured it out when they changed the offensive coordinator and they squeezed in there. So I'm not going to go through every name, but I want to now send it over to Brandon. First coach fired. Someone other than, it's obviously not Robert Saleh for Brandon. He thinks the Jets. He loves the Jets. But what do you got, Brandon?
I mean, look, I don't hate the Robert Saleh pick. You want long tails. That's a long tail. You just picking the other tail. I don't mind that one. You could probably conceivably bet both ends. If it goes sour, it could go very sour too. I'm going to go with the guy that I think fits a lot of what you just talked about, Brandon, but I'm taking a long shot here, my longest shot down the board here. Give me a different first-year coach. Give me Dan Quinn, 100-1 first coach fired. Washington didn't want Dan Quinn to start with. They wanted Ben Johnson. They sent the plane for Ben Johnson and had to get turned down like mid-flight. Dan Quinn, Robert Quinn, all the Quinns. I don't want any of the Quinns. What's he do? He brings in Brian Johnson, failed Eagles coordinator. Anthony Lynn, couldn't do anything anywhere he's gone. Daryl Tapp, Ken Norton. The reeks of, hey, I know a guy. It's the Panthers all-star staff from last year. And don't forget, you bring in Cliff Kingsbury to run the offense. Bubble screens for days. Like, if Dan Quinn is not the franchise, Jane Daniels is the franchise. If this starts out poorly, Josh Harris, you think he cares about $30 million guaranteed to Quinn? This is a $6 billion dude. He is going to hit the eject button and get Jane Daniels the right guy. And if it looks like this is not the right guy quickly, I would not be surprised if he's just like, all right, get this staff out of here. Let's do something different.
Or, work with me here. What if they are scoring points and Cliff Kingsbury is actually doing well, but Dan Quinn screws up his side of the ball and they empower Kingsbury?
So again,
I know you hate him, but that's
to win, Brandon. We just want multiple ways to win. 100-1. Let's go. Washington Commanders. We got multiple Washington fades this episode.
There is a path, though, for Kingsbury to be a hero in this. I just want to throw that out there. If it works and he whispers to Jaden Daniels.
Listen, we don't have a drop for Kingsbury being a hero. You might be the drop for Kingsbury being a hero now, but it's an election year. I'll fade Washington all day long in election year. So just give me ways to do that.
Perfect. Last one, then we'll do best bets. We'll recap some of the picks these guys gave out the last hour or so. Player long shots. Joe Gallant, you can go first.
Okay, so I bet this last year. I feel like I got kind of hosed on it. I'm going right back to it. And it is Josh Allen to throw the most interceptions at 10-1. He is right now a co-favorite with Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. He's also the second favorite to win MVP, which is just hilarious. But he has thrown the most interceptions total over the last 3 seasons. He's had the second in most interceptions in each of the last 3 seasons, where he finished with the second most interceptions. 78 picks in his 94 career games. He has double-digit interceptions in 5 of his 6 seasons in the NFL. And 8 of his 18 interceptions last year were just against divisional opponents. And according to Sean Kerner, second hardest strength of schedule. They've got a weaker wide receiver room and weaker skill positions to throw to. They already got injuries to Curtis Samuel and Marcus Valdez-Scantling. Keon Coleman's still a rookie. Allen is also one of those quarterbacks. There's only a handful of them that has a long leash when it comes to interceptions and turnovers. He's probably one of the few quarterbacks who could throw 3 interceptions in a game and still not be benched. And for a little week 1 tidbit, he starts the season versus the Arizona Cardinals. Well, in the last 16 games versus NFC opponents, he's thrown an interception in 14 of them. 21 total interceptions in 16 games against the NFC. So again, when you're facing an opponent in the opposite conference and right off the week, like he finished as the second most profitable quarterback for game-to-game interception props last year. You would have bet 1 unit on every game he played. You would have made 7.4 units in profit for Josh Allen. So I think right now I'm just doubling down on that. I would not be shocked if it's around minus 130 in week 1 against the Cardinals. But I'm going to take the season long at 10-1 for Josh Allen to lead the league in interceptions.
In the bigger picture view with the Bills, moving on from Diggs, the reporting out of their camp is they are trying to make it so Allen does not run as much and have a true running game. But with that said, maybe he'll be throwing the ball more. If Cook establishes, but Allen running more is what I'm getting at. Trying to sit in the pocket and throw the ball, which with younger receivers too, Keon Coleman, I know is a nice player. Younger, Shakir's getting a lot of love early on. Curtis Samuel, you don't have dudes that bail you out as much, I guess. So, like the look, interceptions. Jill, I'm not surprised interceptions get brought up on this podcast. Okay, last one, player long shot from Brandon.
All right, I think this is actually one of the most fun bets you can make on a future this season. Give me Tyreek Hill to have at least 200 receiving yards in any game this season, plus 275. Now look, if you bet this bet last year, you cashed on opening day. He had 215 yards and 2 touchdowns in the opener. He had a 181 and a 163 by the end of October. Previous year, he had 4 games, 160 or higher by the end of October. In the last 2 seasons, the Mike McDaniel seasons, he has 12 games of 143 yards or better. So I'll do the math for you. About once every 3 weeks, you're at 143 yards or better. You're watching on Sunday afternoon on NFL Red Zone. The TV flips over to Miami and Tua's dropping back, and you get that moment every Sunday for the whole season. The bomb is in the air, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this the Tyreek one? We're 1 bomb away from 200. It's so fun. I can't wait to just root for crazy Tyreek Hill yardage totals. 200 a game is child's play for Tyreek Hill, plus 275.
Even just yak, right? You're into that. Just catch it 10 yards out and then run. Love it. Okay, let's recap best bets. So we're going to take from these 25 plus combined, and they're going to give their favorite ones. Brandon, you first.
All right, I'll take Seahawks playoffs plus 215 to make the playoffs. Give me my Panthers Island 13-1 division winner and that Browns division plus 550. And then I'll go Dolphins most points scored 16-1.
Jill?
I'm going to go with Josh Allen, most interceptions, Jags to make the playoffs at plus 120, and I'm also with the Browns division at plus 550.
Okay. Excellent job, both of you. I know you guys put a lot of time into this, and your research and what you've put into it, preparation-wise, doesn't all make the 1 hour, but it helps you filter it through your brain and then make your arguments. So I know that there's a lot of time that gets put into this. So hats off, Joe Gallant, Brandon Anderson, follow these guys in the Action app. If you don't do so already, they'll be adding these. And I would also just add, and you guys have hinted at this, live in-season plays that, man, I know Brandon's all over that. Jill, you'll dabble as well. This is a kind of episode to remind you there are angles you can take once the season starts based on anything. Injuries, how a team is overperforming, underperforming. That's why it's really important to follow these guys in the app and stay locked in over at the Action Network. We will return here on the Action Network podcast later this week with season-long player props. Chris Raybon, Sean Kerner will be with you for that. And then next week, NFL Week 1, we'll kick things off with Mr. Brandon Anderson talking his favorite bets on NFL award categories. So a little more specific market and we'll get Brandon to dive into that. For Joe Gallant, Brandon Anderson, Brendan Glasheen, thanks so much for listening to the Action Network podcast. Hope you enjoyed our long shots and exotics episode. Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Best of luck.